How are you guys today? Please forgive my sexist language. How are you, ladies and gentlemen, today? I'm going to begin by taking roll, and then we're going to continue looking at chapter 4, which looked at physicians and nurses and other healthcare professionals. Can you hear me okay?
Um, your voice is okay. I think there's something like crackling in the background or something.
Okay, you're on.
Okay.
Yes, can I hear you?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Try again.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay. Saber, Stephanie, Abriana. If you're here, say present. Okay. Nazanin, Destiny, Giselle, Jaziel, Jaziel, Wiley, Natalia, Jelaya, Jasmine. Jasmine, are you here? Karen,
Present.
okay. Um, Ajane, Danielle, Audrey.
Present.
Okay, thank you. Um, Tal, Aaliyah.
Wait, did you say tell?
Yes.
Oh, wait, here.
Okay. I had marked you, but you still should say present. I marked you present. Aaliyah. Aaliyah. She's normally here. Kiosha. Carolyn Jones.
Here.
Thank you. I'm so happy I finally remembered to add your name to the roll. Um, Genesis, Victoria, Anthony M., Daniel T., Daniel, Vanessa, Kalissa, Kalissa,
Yes, Calista.
Kalissa, uh, Daniel Y., Brittany, Brittany, Isidore,
Present.
Shelby,
Present.
Austin, Faria,
Present.
Eden,
Present.
Samara, Iris,
Present.
and Francis. Okay. I want to ask you guys a question.
Um,
Yes.
I didn't hear my name.
Okay. What's your name?
Sienna Jose.
Is it Jones or did you say Kiana?
Jose.
I don't see you on the roster here. Have I called you before? I've send me over a note so I can.
I didn't hear it for the last meeting either.
Okay. Send me a note over so I can add you to the roster, okay? And thank you
Okay,
for
sure.
letting me know. Okay. I want to ask you guys a question. All of you are healthcare, and you have made some decisions. What this chapter really should say to you is, have I selected the area of healthcare that's best for me in terms of becoming a healthcare provider or professional? I hope that as you read this chapter, that you began to query yourself to say, do I really want to be a public health person, or do I want to be a nurse practitioner? Do you see? So you may decide that you want to continue, but you also may decide that you want to blend some of these positions. It's not being one or the other, is it? Can all of you see that? You can be a healthcare administrator, but you can also have a specialty as a psychologist. Do you guys remember seeing psychologists as being one of the type of jobs that falls under healthcare? So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at some of these other positions, and we're going to talk about the question of if I decided to go in that direction. For example, pharmacy. You could be a healthcare administrator with a degree in pharmacy also. So let's kind of talk about some of these. But first, I wanted to ask some of you, would any of you consider, instead of relying on just that one degree, being the healthcare administrator or public health person, plus some of these other positions that you've read about in this chapter? You have to talk to me, guys. It's not a lecture, it's a dialogue. Go ahead.
I mean, I'm already complementary with nursing and healthcare administration.
hmm So, would you ever consider finishing your degree in healthcare administration and maybe going to pharmacy school?
No, I'm focused on the nursing route.
Okay, would you are you planning to do both, the healthcare administration and the nursing?
No, just nursing.
Okay, so if you, as a nurse, have you thought about what type you want to be? Because there are so many options now. Do you want to be there are just so many various options here in nursing now. The advanced, a non-physician practitioner, would you consider that?
I haven't looked at all the options yet, so I'm not sure.
Okay, well, as you go through this chapter, can you promise me that you will look at each one and say, there are many dimensions to me. Which one of these may I want to, occupational choices, would I consider adding to my future plan? Okay. What about some of the rest of you? My ghost students. Okay, we'll just go on in that case. Okay. Now, one of the questions when someone called and asked me about after class was understanding better the differences between allopathic medicine and between osteopathic medicine. Okay? And one of the things that we said is that there is a basic difference in terms of philosophy. The osteopathic physician started from a person who says we have to treat the whole person, whereas the allopathic medicine physician actually started out always with this emphasis upon disease and between illness. So someone also asked me, well, what's the difference if they decided to go to medical school? Should they go to allopathic medicine or should they go to osteopathic medicine? And I first said to them, well, what's your GPA? Because there are some slight differences. For example, for osteopathic medicine, you only have to have like maybe a 3.7 GPA. But typically, to get into allopathic a medical school, they often like for it to be a bit higher than that. On the well, you can actually get into osteopathic medicine with just the 3.5 GPA, and that 3.72 is what the allopathic physicians like to see. Schools. Also, the MCAT score can be a bit different. Like on average, you have to have an MCAT of a 511 to get into an allopathic medical school, but only around 503 to get into an osteopathic. Okay? But these positions are coming closer together now because many of the hospitals and many of the programs that used to would only hire those who had the allopathic degree, the MDs, will now hire people who have the DOs instead. Okay? In general, for both of these, you need to have a good GPA. I would recommend pulling it up as high as possible. Some of you, I shouldn't say that because some of you already have a 3.9 or so, or 4 points, and you're so nervous you're going to fall below that. So don't get nervous, those of you who already, don't put additional pressure on yourself. Okay? But you know how you have to have the chemistry, 8 semesters at it, general chem, and you have to have the organic chemistry. Okay? You also know that you need a biochemistry course at least. You need either 2 semesters of statistics or you need calculus, 2 semesters of calculus. Okay? You also need general college physics. Did you guys know that the bachelor's in physics is considered as being the most difficult one to get, but you don't have to have a major in physics to go to medical school if you decided to do that. You also need to have good writing skills. And then something else is important, which most of you have, are good computer skills. But the last thing, and this is why I encourage you to work in groups, is they want to see evidence that you know how to work with others. You have to have your 3 letters of reference. 2 of those should be from a science person. The third should be from someone who's not in science. Oftentimes, they like to see that you have, what do they call it when you go on site and you shadow a physician or someone, or even if you're going into nursing, they like to see that you've done some shadowing. Okay? They want a strong personal statement. And this is true for those of you who are going to graduate school in healthcare administration or public health. And you can say, well, what is a strong personal statement? What is it? What would you consider a strong personal statement?
Something that reflects your values and your work ethic in the medical industry.
It is
That's
that.
I was like a event in your life that reflects who you are and who you can be when you become a doctor or a healthcare administrator. Something that shows that you have what it takes.
That's true. That's absolutely correct. Okay. What about any others of you have any idea about a strong personal statement? Can you see that what makes a personal statement strong it's what you say, but it's also how you say it. When you write, and we've talked about this before, remember we talked about the importance of your putting cosmetics on your words. If you have adjectives, if you have nouns, you want to put some interesting adjectives. If you have adverbs, you want to put some interesting adverbs in front of them, because the critical thing is the one that's memorable. And it's having the information you guys have mentioned, but you want it to write it in such a way that it's going to like, ah. And there are some of you in here who are such good writers that I have to apologize. I had to send you a note saying, uh, is this plagiarized? Please consider that as having been a compliment, and don't be insulted when I ask you that. Okay? Also, if you're applying for any higher education position to be admitted to some school in healthcare or even in the job market, do not believe it when they say come in with a one-page resume. Go in with at least a two-page resume or even more if you've had work experience. The other thing that you do with your resume, if you haven't had a lot of work experience, you focus it around what your competencies are, what you can do, rather than what you have done in the past. Because you guys are young, you haven't had chance to do a lot of things. You also, they want to see extracurricular activities. So remember, in healthcare, we have a student club that's very active. And so you guys may want to consider joining it. Also, the campus has all types of clubs and things. And I know some of you have busy, busy lives, but you may want to, they like to see evidence of that. Okay? Once you finish, one of the things I know that the quizzes and exams are different to you. You had to take, in order to be admitted to UNLV, you had to take an exam, didn't you? A standardized exam. In every field, in nursing, aren't you going to have to pass an exam? In every field, they now use assessment tests to make sure that you do know what it is your transcript is saying that you know. And so one of the things that's important is being able to develop good test-taking skills. All that is just doing level 2 and level 3 reasoning. That's all it is. And also when you study, it's being able to not just memorize it, but to make what you're reading make sense to you so that you remember it in your head. None of you are senior citizens, so your minds are very vibrant and can retain a lot of information. So those are some of the types of things that will help you to enter into some of these type of positions we have been discussing. We talked the other day about how primary care physicians differ from specialists. Okay? Do we have any? We had one pre-med school student, but I don't think she's here. Do we have any other pre-med people in here? Anybody else? Do we have any people who may consider medical school in here? Even if not, anywhere in healthcare, you need to know what's the difference between a primary care physician and a specialist. And your author has an interesting way. The author tells us that the primary care physicians are the ones who are the gateway. They're your first step when you go in and you need healthcare. They mention to you that family and that they look at the entire body and the entire systems, the primary care physicians. And they mention that family medicine is a primary care specialty. Pediatrics, okay? Internal medicine, OGBYN, because OGBYN physicians look at everything about the female. They're just simply, the focus is on the differences but they look at every area of health. Okay? Geriatrics look at every area of health about people who are older. Okay? Urologists are actually considered as being a primary care because urologists are primarily, a lot of them provide services to males, and they are a counterpart to the OBGYN. But then, of course, we have all of the specialties. And the author tells you that the specialties tend to be based either around age. Notice the pediatrician, who is a generalist, but is also, isn't that based upon age? And the gerontologist is based upon age. But they also tell you that the specialists are based around various organs in the body. The cardiologists, our hearts. The nephrologist, the nephrologist, I'm sorry, for our kidneys, the transplant specialists, the urologists, you see? And then the other area where we find these specialties is in areas where unique skills are needed. Would you believe the highest paid physicians are the oh my gracious, the ones, not, people think of them, of surgeons as always being the highest paid, but they're not. They're the anesthesiologists are actually the highest paid physicians. And notice they are theirs because it's a very unique type of skill that they are giving to us. Okay? Let me stop, and we could go on and break down all of the different specialties, but we want to move forward and look a little bit more at some of these primary care physicians. Are there any questions on anything we've talked about thus far? Any questions? Okay. One of the questions that you could ask is, are the physicians evenly distributed throughout the country? Notice we have said that there are less than 1 million active physicians. So would you think they would be evenly distributed, or do you think they're not?
No, they wouldn't be evenly distributed.
No, they are not. Okay? The Northeast tends to have more physicians per 100,000 than the South does. And one of your questions would be, does this make a difference in terms of health outcomes? And it does. Your author mentions, for example, that in Massachusetts there are 443.5 physicians per 100,000 people. And in Mississippi, there are only 271 physicians per 100,000 people. So that tells us that Massachusetts has 38.3% more physicians per 100,000 people than is true in Mississippi. The question is, how does this reflect itself in health outcomes? Okay? It absolutely does. In Massachusetts, the average life expectancy is 80 years. In Mississippi, it's 71.8 years. Now, all of that is not based upon the distribution of physicians. Some of it is based upon lifestyle and all of those other things. But if you have lifestyles like the Southern lifestyle, where we have all of the wonderful desserts and all of that, you need even a higher ratio of physicians to treat you once you become ill. And so we see that it really does make a difference, the distribution of physicians. Okay? Now, one of the things that you guys often hear about the physician shortage, the nurses shortage, that there is going to be a crisis in terms of healthcare professionals, clinicians, and other professionals based upon some of the things we talked about on Monday. Remember, we talked about the aging of the population. We talked about the growth in terms of the overall population. One of the things that the ACA did was to pass some policies to increase the number of health professionals. And all of you can benefit from some of these. I don't know if those of you who are in nursing know that there are special programs that will allow you to get certain types of scholarships and grants simply because you're going into nursing. And this was passed under the ACA. The same thing is true for physicians. There are all types of, I call it stimuli money, in order to try to draw people in your generation into healthcare. Okay? And this is because of the emerging physician shortage, the current nurses shortage, and some of the shortages in other areas of healthcare. The other thing that the ACA did was to try to broaden the content of what nurses do and what physicians do so that we could include some of the things such as the behavioral, the whole person, the behavior aspects of healthcare. What good does it do as a nurse, if you go in and you're taking all of this great care of the patient and you walk out of the room and the patient begins smoking a cigarette? Okay? So one of the things, this is a behavioral aspect of healthcare that the ACA has tried to bring into the whole practice of medicine. The other thing that the ACA did was to try to get healthcare professionals to be more conscious of cultural differences in how people receive healthcare, how they practice their health behaviors, and all of those type of things. And this is not just with physicians and nurses, it's also true in the area of public health. Any questions? We're going to move past the and began looking a bit at dentists. If you remember though, in the first week in the lecture notes, we have all of the data in there about these healthcare professionals already. Any questions? Let me ask you.
No.
Oh, go ahead.
I just said no, just your response.
Oh, okay. Okay. Let me ask you guys a question. How many of you delay dental care? Or do you, not you, I want to say, do you know any people who delay dental care?
A couple.
Why do you think people delay dental care?
It's not like an immediate health issue, I guess, cleaning your teeth.
Okay. That's a good reason. That's one of the
I would say because of financial reasons. It is kind of expensive to fix a broken tooth or filling or any sort of dental issue.
right. And most of your insurance does not include dental care. Have you noticed that? Most healthcare insurance doesn't include dental care. Did any of you watch the film, the film that we had on the list for you to view, the cowboy film? It's really about healthcare. I think it was there for last week, where it talked about healthcare in the West. I can't quite remember the name of it. But one of the things when you look, if you go all the way back in the history of healthcare, most people see our teeth as being cosmetic. Do you see that? Whereas they see our hearts and these other body parts as not being cosmetic. So, as a consequence of that, remember in chapter 3, when they began changing how medicine is practiced, how physicians are trained, and all, they didn't do the same type of changes for dentistry because, as you're saying, people delay it because they really don't see it as being important beyond the cosmetic purposes. Did you have a question? But recent evidence has said that that is not true. Recent evidence suggests that dentistry should actually be something that you specialize in after medical school, and that you should go to medical school first in order to do dentistry. The reason for that is because they have now found out that tooth decay and gum disease can create health problems that affect other systems of the body. Does anyone know any of how that is true? What happens?
I was reading that because if there's tooth decay, it can get the bacteria in your mouth can get into your bloodstream, and it can I believe it can affect your cardiovascular health, and it can
Exactly.
even affect your brain if the bloodstream goes into your brain.
Exactly. Exactly. In other words, we're saying our teeth are a lot more than what? Cosmetic. Okay? And you are absolutely correct. Everything you're saying is absolutely correct. So you can end up with an abscess in your tooth that goes to your brain, your heart, and all of those other places. Okay? Now, what are some of the different types of dentists that the author lists in our textbook?
Orthodontist,
And what is it that they do? What do they do?
they straighten teeth using braces.
Okay. Any of you have, when you were younger, you had the braces and all that you hated?
I did.
What are some other branches that the author has?
Pediatric dentistry, so dental care for children.
Exactly. Okay. So, in other words, there are branches. But did you notice that compared to physicians, how few dentists we have? Do we have 200,000 dentists at the time that the text was written?
It says that on the table 4.4 on page 85, total is 169,480.
Right. Do you think that we may have too few dentists? If we were to divide it out in terms of looking at the same type of ratio we've been talking about for physicians, we would see that we have a very few dentists in terms of per 100,000 people. Pharmacists. Okay. Do we have any people who are interested in pharmacy or used to be interested in pharmacy before you discovered healthcare administration and public health? What do pharmacists, how do you How does one become a pharmacist? There are a couple of ways you can do it. Okay. I'm sure we have some people on here who, when you were in high school, you had a very high average and you had taken the sciences and everything. You can actually apply to pharmacy school directly from high school, and it takes you about 6 years in that case to finish the degree. You can go 2 to 3 years, you can get a 2 year degree from CSN, and then you could go to pharmacy school if you have a high enough score, on the exam for 4 years. You can go to UNLV for 3 years, but I wouldn't suggest you drop out after 3 years and then go directly. Or you can finish the 4 years at UNLV and then you can apply to pharmacy school. Okay? So there are a couple of ways that you can go to pharmacy school. But as I said, I would never recommend that you going from high school is okay, but don't drop out of undergraduate school to go. How many pharmacists were there at the time that the textbook was written?
Sorry,
231,000?
Right. And there were 128 programs for pharmacists. Okay? Where do pharmacists work?
mostly retail.
Right. Walmart, Walgreens, all of those, the
CVS.
pharmacies, CVS, you see, those are those retail stores, and that's where they work. The second place where they're most likely to work are what?
Hospitals.
Hospitals. Okay. And it's interesting, they also, I think the author says this, I believe it's the author, but I have it, online pharmacies, wholesale. You notice how a lot of people buy their medications online and they buy wholesale. They have to have pharmacists there in order to do that. Okay. Do pharmacists earn a lot of income?
It says page 86 that 2016 annual salary of pharmacists range between 87,120 and 157,950 dollars.
Right. A person who's an NPP can earn that easily, can't they? But I don't want you guys to, please, when I talk with you about the importance of economic freedom, don't ever go into an occupation because of what it will earn you. You go where your heart, you have to work where it makes your heart beat faster. That's the type of work. Because work is what, a third of your life, isn't it? Is it a third or more of each of your days? So don't you want to enjoy the process of working? So please don't go into an occupation simply because of the income. I think we talked about how you can get into pharmacy school. Okay? We can also say, what are some other doctoral level health professions that you can enter into? Okay? Isn't nursing a doctoral level? You can get a doctorate in it, right?
Yeah.
The author also talks about optometry. How does an optometrist differ from an ophthalmologist?
Optometrists provide vision care.
Right? And what do doctors do, MDs? Diseases, right? So ophthalmologists uh, are for diseases and illnesses of the eyes, whereas optometrists are for your regular day-to-day type of eye care. Let me ask you guys. You guys stay on your computers a lot. Do any of you have any of you experienced any problems from doing that?
Yeah.
Tell us about them.
No, like the way I had my glasses because I believe I've stood like too much on like my iPad or something. I wasn't really regulated on it. And then like with a computer, I think I have more I guess endurance with staring at a screen, but it would end up becoming like if I'm too tired, it'll be like blurry.
Those are very strong symptoms. Would you believe I would project that there's going to be a huge shift in demand for optometrists because of computers? Because
Yeah.
it causes dry eye. Once you get dry eye, it's chronic, isn't it? It's not acute. You continue to have dry eye. So there are a lot of consequences of being on the computer, on your cell phones. When when school was in, I would just sit outside sometimes and observe the students. Everybody is on there. They're texting or doing something as they walk across campus. Isn't that true of your generation?
Yes.
Um, Podiatrists. There aren't many podiatrists, are there? Chiropractors, there are more than what? Podiatrists? Yeah.
Podiatrists are 11,000 and chiropractors at 47,400.
Exactly. Okay. Psychologists now. Do you think people are going to need more psychologists or less psychologists?
I think there'll be more psychologists.
Exactly. For some reason, can some of you just share with me, because I'm just curious, what is it about this particular era? I don't mean just the COVID era, but it's something in your generations um, that some forces that are out there that really are attacking the mental and emotional health of your generation. What do you think some of those things are? I don't know. I've done research, but I still haven't been able to find, a solid reason.
Maybe it's because a lot of kids these days have to be more competitive. They have to
Okay,
do a lot more extracurriculars.
That's a good answer. That's a good answer. Some of the rest of you.
I think it's a number of reasons. It could be your family background, or it could be just school, social media. There's a whole bunch of influence into it. In high school, especially, um, friend groups are a huge influence as to how one can feel, and they could negatively affect your mental health group. I know that's something that a lot of high school students face, especially now because of COVID. Their mental health is deteriorating because they can't hang out with their friends and they're stuck in this kind of internet zone and they're not seeing anyone. So it negatively affects their emotional health.
That's an interesting. That would be a very interesting project just to do, looking at the mental health of young adults, teens and young adults. It's all of that. Because even before COVID, I think I had mentioned to you that there has been such an increase in behavior and emotional and mental health uh, concerns amongst your particular generation. And people are not paying enough attention to it because your generation, I know this sounds like a cliche, but you guys are truly the future, and the near future, not the distant future. And so, but have you noticed you haven't heard a lot about these things that are going on with your generation? Do you see
Um,
online in a lot of about your generation health needs?
I'm sorry, about what about our generation?
Your generation's emotional and mental and behavioral health needs. I don't see a lot of people paying attention to it, you know, some because of the COVID, but even before COVID, I just don't see enough attention being paid to that.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people just kind of gloss over it and just don't really think it's important enough. But I think we're definitely taking more time to talk about it. There is, I isn't like September Mental Health Awareness Month,
Hmm.
so I guess we're kind of talking more about it. But there's definitely some improvement that's needed for sure.
Exactly, without question. So, can you see that more psychologists are probably going to be needed?
Yeah.
Did, did you guys know that if you were interested in going into psychology, you don't have to major in it. You would have to take enough classes so that when you took the graduate record exam, you could score high on that particular area. But you could go directly into a PhD program in psychology without getting a master's. Uh, and normally, if you get into those programs, they're going to give you financial aid to help cover the cost. And most of it would not be loan financial aid either. So that is a great, and in addition to that, as a psychologist, you become licensed. Notice you have to be licensed for all of these areas in healthcare. And that's because if not, you can do damage to individuals. But the thing is that you can be in private practice as a psychologist, have your own clients, you know, be Medicare and Medicaid certified and certified with various insurances so that you can take them. You can even have a practice and have other psychologists working for you. I wouldn't recommend chiropractor. Did you know that chiropractors actually um, by accident, KILL, quite a few people. They end up damaging some of the um, uh, veins and arteries in the back when they're doing their manipulations. That ends up creating some problems. And in addition to that, most people, don't you think, see chiropractors as being almost an imposter in the field of healthcare?
Yes. The same thing goes for veterinarians.
Oh, you think they don't? They see veterinarians in that way?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, that's interesting because your isn't your generation. You guys are really the pet generation, aren't you?
I guess. But I don't think people give as much importance to an animal's lives over a human's life.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Even though some people once you bond with a pet, it can be very traumatic when you lose one. So, okay, let's talk some more about nurses. Okay. And then I want, before we leave today, I want us to um, talk a bit about your projects because, you know, we're moving on in the semester and I want you guys to get organized to do your projects early enough, okay? Um, are you planning to become an advanced practice nurse, an RN, or what?
Me?
Yes,
RN. I'm pretty open to different options.
okay. Um, there's a lot of opportunity for advanced practice nurses. If you like to be in hospitals, which I don't like hospitals, you could become a clinical nurse specialist. that type of advanced practice nurse. If you are entrepreneurial, you could become a non-physician practitioner, and they normally work in private practices with physicians. A certified nurse midwife can have their own practice. So there's a lot of opportunity in terms of these new areas of nursing that's been opening up. The author also has some other information in there about healthcare administrators. There's one fear in terms of healthcare administration, and that's is one concern that I have, even though that's my area is healthcare administration, is that when you focus only your objective is to go into a job, to work there for the rest of your life, there are only so many healthcare facilities. Isn't that true?
Yeah.
And so even though in any hospital, there are many types of healthcare jobs that healthcare administrators do, people, you're not thinking as much about entrepreneurial opportunities in healthcare where you can use your healthcare administration skills. I think I mentioned to you that once we get past the first exam, I want to have a few speakers. And there's an ex-student of mine I had mentioned to you who owns 20 group homes now. And I wanted to get her to do a video, to come into the class so that she can kind of answer some questions about how she got started and how she ended up, becoming an entrepreneur. And she still has a job. She teaches at a local college there. University of Maryland. She teaches there. But she has, as I said, this entrepreneurial activity. And did you know that there's a lot of opportunity for healthcare administrators in the area of healthcare consulting? Hospitals. Have any of you ever heard of Hospital Compare? The government rates all types. If you receive Medicare and Medicaid money, they're going to rate you. And they rate down a lot of hospitals. So those hospitals who have bad ratings need specialists who can come in and help identify their problems and solve them. Those are healthcare consultants whose area of specialty is healthcare administration. Nursing homes. Las Vegas, Clark County has some of the worst nursing homes in the country. New York City, not New York City, New York State has some of the worst nursing homes. You can't see that creates an entrepreneurial opportunity for those of you who are healthcare administrators to have your jobs, but to also have a consulting business that can go in and help make these healthcare organizations better, help them to function better. A lot of healthcare organizations have people who are burned out, so there's a lot of absenteeism. That absenteeism can create problems. That becomes a marketing opportunity for you as a healthcare administrator also. Okay. Any other questions? There are other things in your chapter, but as I say, I always like to try to bring some things to you that relate to the topic that are not necessarily in your chapters. Your chapters are only 24 pages normally, and I know that you all can read, and that if you have any unique questions from the chapters, you would call me and ask me, or you would ask me in class. So I'm going to stop and see if you have any particular questions that you want us to address before we go on and talk some more about the project. Any questions?
No.
Okay. Anybody else other than the present students? What about my ghost students? Any of you have any questions?
No.
Okay. Okay, let's talk about two things I want us to talk about. One is the exam. Your first exam is next week, not this week. And this chapter that we're covering now will be on that exam, not on the quiz this week. Okay. Do you have any questions about the exam that if you could tell me some of the things that I could do to help you in terms of making sure you do well on the exam?
Is there going to be level 1, 2, 3 questions with written responses?
Yes, it's going to be quite a few level 2 and 3. Notice for the quizzes we gave you basically a fewer levels 2 and 3. But yes, there will be levels 1, 2, and 3 on there because my objective is to get you to do the level 2 and 3 thinking. Now, I had an idea that could be an extra credit. Uh, I had, I, I hate the term extra credit. That could be a bonus point. Would be one of the best ways in the past that has helped students to learn how to answer level 2 and 3 questions is when they do their studying to make some up. And it's easier to do that if you have a group, even though there would be 4 of you and you only have to make up 10 questions each. But you get to talk through those answers as you're going through, the chapters. There are 4 chapters. So if you did 3 level 2 or 3 questions on each chapter and 2 for one, because it's only 10, it would give you a chance to go through the chapters, talk through it with your group, and then to submit them to me. And as I said, you would get, with your answers to them, you would get bonus points for that because it's only if your answer to your own question is incorrect that you would lose the points. And I wouldn't expect that to happen. But we also use some of those questions, the good ones, in the exam. We actually would do that. We could promise you that we would use at least 10% of the questions in there. So I wanted to see if you thought that would be a good exercise for you to help prepare you for the exam. The other thing I want you to do is to go through, read all 4 chapters, and if there are any areas that for you seem to be not clear to you, when you read, write those down, and next week we can go over talk about those in class also. Or you can call me. We don't have to just do it in class. We can go over that. But I want you guys to tell me what I can do. I don't want anyone to get less than an 80 on the exam, and tell me what I can do to help support you.
I like the study guide idea.
The what?
The study guide idea for the bonus points.
Okay, where you actually make up some questions, the
Yeah.
exam questions. Okay, and everybody who wants to do it, I'm not forcing you to do it. It's not mandatory. But if you could do that, and if you could do them, um, and by next Wednesday, where you actually go, you know how you can use the PowerPoint on this thing, where you can put your questions up and go over them in class with a class, and it would kind of serve as the review. And yes, everybody would get 10 points each in the group, but it's only 10 questions per group. Do you see? That's for the groups I know about in here. There are about 4 people in each group. A couple of you have 2 people groups, but you know, so next Wednesday we'll reserve it for you to do, those presentations in class, and then submit them to me, and you can submit them where they're open, where your classmates, if they're here, they will hear your questions, and we will put at least some of those questions on the exam.
So, will our project partners be assigned? How will that work?
Now, I'm not that type of teacher. I'm a democracy. I'm not a autocracy. I'm not going to assign your partners. You know, you have to come up with your partners yourselves. Are there any people online now who doesn't have a group? I know some of you already have groups. Who's looking for a partner?
I don't have a group.
Okay. We have one person who doesn't have a group. Is there anyone else who wants a group and doesn't have one? So you do have one and you don't?
No, I don't.
Okay. Would you, the two of you, like to be in a group?
Yeah, I'd be down.
Okay. Well, can you guys contact each other after the class and try, if you want to work in a group, and try to form your groups, because it's useful when you can't associate now when you take exams, but it's just useful to you when you have assignments or you have bonus point opportunities, and for the project it's very useful to work in a group.
For the exam, is it still open book?
Of course, everything is open book in any of my classes. Remember, I'm not trying to force you to what? Memorize. We're trying to help you develop your analytical skills. So yes, everything is open book. It's open device. You can use your cell phone and your computer to go to Google to try to get help on the questions. There's only one thing you can't do, and what is that?
Collaborate with others.
Right. You can't talk to others while you're taking the exam and collaborate on the answers. You absolutely, because it's for your mind, do you see, to develop those analytical skills. And hopefully your colleagues are doing the same thing, but you can't, that's not the time to collaborate. When you study, if you're studying or doing your questions, your practice questions we're talking about, you know, talk to each other and come up with some really good level 2 and level 3 questions, okay? But make
When
sure the answers are correct too. So
when is the study guide due again?
it's not a study guide. It's what? It's a quiz that you're coming up with.
Yes, yes. When's that due?
It's up to you. Do you
Thank
see?
you.
At latest, it would be on Wednesday because I want you to present them in class. I want to spend the entire time on Wednesday with you presenting your questions and answers and explaining to the class why your answers are what they are and walking them through the process from analyzing the question to analyzing each answer and deciding whether it's true or false to finally coming up with the so it's the process that you're really is helping them to each other, you know, to go through the correct process for analyzing.
So it's just 10 questions?
10 questions per group, whether you're a one-person group or whether you're a four-person, 2 or 3 or 4-person group. I prefer you do it as a group though, you know. And you don't have to get together to work as a group, do you? Have we ever been in the same room, many of us?
No.
No. So you don't
No.
have to go meet at the library. I don't want you to put yourselves and your family at risk of COVID. You can do it by phone. You can do it online the same way on Zoom. You know, they're always Google Meet. You can use that. I mean, it's so many ways that you can collaborate and benefit from that. I shouldn't say collaborate, that you can cooperate with each other and build each other's analytical skills by just doing this. And we'll do this before every exam so that, you know, it becomes a way of your reviewing.
Do we only get one attempt for the exam?
Only what?
Do we only get one attempt for the exam?
Yeah. Yep, you only get one attempt. The exam is 50 points, but you have 4 hours to do it. So that gives you plenty of time if you have but you have to study, because if you don't study, you can't analyze. It's too new for you to be able to analyze. So you want to read your exams and all of that, but yeah, you only get one attempt on the exam. But with that much time, if you've studied, you have more than enough time to analyze, but you just can't talk to each other. Once the exam, you can't, you cannot collaborate. Any other questions? Any others? Okay, let's talk about topics, but let's talk about the project. Have any of you thought about your projects yet? At least topics for the projects. Okay? You want to share with the class what topic you're going to explore and how
I
you
was just thinking about looking into healthcare for orphans and how they receive that, since they don't have parental support.
I never thought of that. I love it. I love it. Okay? And how do you plan to deliver the information?
We were thinking about doing maybe like a scripted newscast,
Okay?
do some sort of video or a scripted debate.
Okay? Okay? It would be videotape.
Yeah.
If you look in, I believe it was week 1, did you notice that we have a lot of things up there about that you can use when you're videotaping? Like you don't videotape with your phone vertical, you do it with it horizontal. We have some readings up there about how you can edit and all of those things. Because your cell phones are what's called 4K, and they can look just like a real movie if you know how to use them. So do some research about how you do what you're doing so that you pick up another set of technical skills that you can then use in other classes. Okay, what about some of the rest of my my ghost students? What are some of the topics you've thought of? Audrey? Audrey?
Yes.
Have you thought about your topic for the project that you want to do yet?
I was thinking about maybe doing like the flu shot, cause like
Doing the, I'm sorry.
the flu shot, like the importance of a flu shot.
Okay. How would you deliver it if you're going to
Maybe like a presentation or like a website.
you use presentations, we don't put papers presentations in that way. It's not, so we put something, you can do a creative product so that if you are getting ready to do an internship and they interview you, as you're about to walk out, you turn around and you show it to them, and it's so beautiful. And you say, oh, by the way, this is a sample of my work. So I want you, to make sure that your content is also delivered in an exciting way. What would you do if you were going to do something on the flu shot?
I would want to make a video, but like I'm not really good with like editing skills.
Okay, let's talk about your projects before you begin on them for each one of you. Okay, because I want to make sure these projects were 250 points. That's more than the final. That's 25% of your grade. So I want to make sure that you do very good projects. In addition to them, because they're worth so many points, I have to turn them in to my dean, and my dean it has to show them to the accreditation people, and so they have to be really outstanding. In addition to that, as I said before, if you turn them in early enough, we'll keep reviewing them until they get to a point where they're outstanding. But there are some topics that you can't make outstanding, so it has to be an interesting topic. Let's see who else. um, Carol? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say another way we were going to present or thinking about presenting was making a magazine, and each of our group was going to make a couple of pages and make like a really cool magazine with the information we're presenting.
I love that. We've had some before, and I wish I had them so that I could show you. I may have a couple at home, but normally I have to turn them into the school. They have been so beautiful that it's just unbelievable, where people look at them and they go, even the accreditation team, when they come out, and they're coming at the end of the month for School of Public Health. So that sounds great. Carolyn Jones. Who else was here earlier? Brittany. I'm sorry, Brittany. Hello, Brittany. Eden.
Yes.
Have you thought about your project yet?
I'm thinking about doing maybe a brochure or a story about Black women disparities in healthcare, because there's a lot of statistics that I was seeing a few ago about how Black women, especially for birth, are at an increasingly higher possibility of dying during birth because of discrimination and sexism in the healthcare industry. So I was thinking about doing a brochure on ways Black women can find different ways of having birth, like home birth and midwives and stuff like that.
You could do the topic, but you can't do a brochure. If you were going into the store, would you pay $250 for a brochure?
No, that's why I don't know if it's gonna be a brochure per se. It's more like it's not something to do doing like a story with like adding in elements of it. So it can kind of be like a story and like information to give to an audience.
That's one way that you could do it. You mean like a short story with
Yes.
graphics, photographs from the period photographs? That's one way. Another way you could do it as a documentary. There's something that's called stock footage, and you can get old stock footage from the Library of Congress for that, and then you would write your script to go with it, and you would voice it, you and your partners. But when you write it, you can't plagiarize. It has to be in your own words. And then you have visuals. It's like a documentary. You would have to study something about how you edit, but it would be easy for you to do. So that would be another way to do it. Okay, but think about doing it in a way that's interesting. And I like the topic. And remember that there can't be plagiarism. Faria. Faria, are you still here? Shelby? Iris? Okay. Well, thank you guys thank you ladies for coming. And all of you have my number. If you have any questions or comments, or you just need to talk, feel free to call me. As I said, I have consent from my husband until 12 midnight. I'll see you next week.
Bye. Thank you.
Okay.